started a series called Table Talk on Sundays, and we're talking about communion. And one of the things that when I think about communion is I think about the bread. And in the first century, they didn't have many food options like we have. They didn't have an H-E-B or Walmart that they could go through and look at all the different aisles of food. Bread was a main staple for them. And they learned to make it in different ways. They ate round and flat bread and even created flavors with it with grapes and honey. They had unleavened bread, sometimes called the bread of haste, which that was the bread which the Hebrews brought with them when they fled to Egypt and did not have time to let the bread rise. It continues to be eaten today at Passover meals, where it reminds them of their ancestors being released from slavery in Egypt. Of course, when I think of bread, I think about manna that God provided in the book of Exodus. I think about the grain offerings that are in the Bible. I think about the bread of the presence in the tabernacle and the temple. I think about Bethlehem being called the house of bread. I think about the feeding of the 5,000, where Jesus took some bread and multiplied it with some fish, feeding of the 5,000 and the 4,000. I think about the Lord's Prayer, where he talks about providing us daily bread. I think about how Jesus called himself the bread of life. I think about the Last Supper. I think about how the early church broke bread together, how they ate together. I think about 1 Corinthians chapter 11, where in verse 23 he says, "For I received the Lord that which I also delivered to you, that the Lord Jesus, on the night he was betrayed, took bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and said, 'This is my body. This is for you. Do this in remembrance of me.' And in the same way, he also took the cup after the supper, saying, 'This is the cup of the new covenant, my blood, and do this often as you drink in remembrance of me. For as often as you eat this bread and drink this cup, you proclaim the Lord's death until he comes.'" The next time that you eat some bread, will you think about how significant bread was in the Bible, especially as we're going through this series talking about communion?